During a group meditation session at the Jedi Temple, the Masters sensed a sudden and anomalous disturbance in the Force. The feeling was dense, ancient, as if something forgotten had been torn from time. Yoda slowly opened his eyes, locking gazes with Mace Windu, who was already standing silently. A few hours later, leading a small group, they set off for the ruins of a temple long lost in the Orus sector. The place, surrounded by petrified vines and corroded relics, seemed to whisper ancient lamentations. It was there, among the destroyed columns, that the air distorted and a figure shrouded in translucent shadows appeared before them. Darth Revan, wrapped in an ethereal cloak, his eyes glowing and restless. The Master's first reaction was to raise their sabers in defense, instinctively. Revan's presence was charged with pain and power, and his first words were a harsh warning. "You walk on burning ashes. An order buried in the veins of war is about to awaken." Yoda tried to reason with him, but Revan told them, in fragmented sentences, about a betrayal that would come from within, not from without, and that even the most trained eyes would not be able to see until it was too late. His words caused more unease than clarification. Back in Coruscant, the Jedi Council gathered. The room, shrouded in silence and uncertainty, was divided between those who believed that Revan had returned as a legitimate warning and those who saw him as a corrupt echo of the past. Yoda and Mace Windu, more attentive to detail, began to observe the Senate with new eyes. Instead of acting rashly, they decided to monitor everyone's movements, especially those in high positions, looking for patterns of control, manipulation, and influence. Revan began to move silently around the Jedi Temple, appearing briefly in empty corridors, training halls, or in the shadows of meetings. His appearances became a constant presence, disturbing but strangely necessary. Obi-Wan Kenobi, driven by intuition, delved into the Republic archives. During his research, he began to notice inconsistencies in the records of the clone army's creation. There were files sealed under obsolete codes, vague references to fallen masters, and names concealed behind pseudonyms. One specific clue led him to records about Kamino, but the chain of approval for the creation of the clones was missing. Revan's words echoed in his mind. An order buried. It was as if someone had carefully erased the past, line by line. On a quiet night, Obi-Wan was surprised by Revan, who whispered, "The key is close to the heart that burns. Watch the one closest to you, and especially the one who wants to get close with bad intentions." Before he could ask more, the specter disappeared between the columns of the library. Meanwhile, Anakin Skywalker was growing angry at his exclusion from the council meetings. He felt less like a Jedi and more like a weapon of war being kept on the sidelines. He confronted the council in the middle of a meeting, demanding explanations. Mace Windu remained silent, but Yoda tried to calm him with short, ambiguous words. Padme Amidala, concerned about Anakin's explosive temper, tried to comfort him in the Senate, but he only looked away. Obi-Wan, still digesting Revan's riddle, reflected on the previous night's words, realizing that perhaps the warning was pointing to Anakin. His pain, his passion, and his proximity to the very center of the conflict. During a deep meditation in the upper gardens, Yoda was visited by Revan. There were no words, only intense and distressing visions. Lightsabers being knocked to the ground, red lightning streaking across the sky, clones opening fire on masters and apprentices. The clones were the height of danger. In the center, Anakin knelt before a hidden figure, his eyes consumed by the yellow of the dark side. Yoda awoke with a restrained sigh, his hands trembling, and remained for long minutes watching the night sky. When he looked to the side, Revan had already disappeared, leaving only the feeling that the future was not as distant as it seemed. In the council chamber, Revan reappeared, this time to report something from his own time. He revealed that, in the last years of his journey, he faced internal betrayal from soldiers controlled by a secretly implanted code. He said he trusted the institutions of his era too much, and that it cost him his soul. Yoda listened carefully, and Mace Windu, ever pragmatic, questioned whether Revan could be manipulating the Jedi by telling a true story from his past, or just a tale to illustrate the future. But the specter just stared at the floor and muttered, "The scars of time do not lie. Order 66 will be the end of the Jedi." Based on these revelations and especially on the visions reported by Master Yoda, the Jedi began to closely observe the clone battalions scattered throughout Coruscant and other systems. Small teams were assigned to live with and monitor the commanders, analyzing their reactions and patterns. Some masters reported robotic behavior, a lack of hesitation, and automatic responses to commands from authority, a cold obedience without question. Although these signs could be explained as military discipline, Obi-Wan and Yoda agreed that something seemed programmed. Meanwhile, political tension was mounting. The Senate, spurred on by skillful speeches from Chancellor Palpatine, began to accuse the Jedi of arrogance, aloofness, and interference in civil affairs. Palpatine spoke of a balance between military and spiritual authority, and emphasized that loyalty to the Republic should be above ancient traditions. Public opinion began to view the Jedi with suspicion. Even allied senators, such as Bail Organa, felt the pressure intensify. A night meeting was then called at the Jedi Temple. Present, Yoda, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and, silently, Revan. The room was dark, lit only by the reflection of the stars in the windows. Yoda began the conversation by saying that the pieces were falling into place, but the complete picture was still unclear. Obi-Wan shared his findings from the archives, and Windu reported unusual troop movements near the Senate core. Ki-Adi-Mundi was blunt. "Either we trust our instincts, or we accept being surprised." At that moment, Revan spoke just one sentence. "The throne is already occupied by the Shadow, and his subjects will not hesitate to carry out his final order." The silence that followed made everyone wonder who was on the throne, and their thoughts went straight to the Chancellor, but they still had no proof, only suspicions. The Jedi Masters summoned Anakin Skywalker to a silent meeting. Yoda was direct but not aggressive. They wanted him to get closer to Chancellor Palpatine, observing his actions and reporting any unusual behavior. Anakin hesitated, confused. Palpatine was more than a mentor. He was almost a father figure, someone who understood him when the Order merely tolerated him. Even so, he felt he couldn't refuse. As he left the meeting, he didn't look back. The conflict was already in his soul, like a crack slowly growing. That night, Anakin had another nightmare. The galaxy's sky was ablaze as the Jedi Temple collapsed amid screams. He saw Padme in agony, falling into the arms of someone invisible. He felt his own pain grow until he saw himself kneeling before a hooded figure, and his eyes, by reflex, were now yellow like those of a beast. From the top of a stone staircase, a silhouette watched him, Revan. He saw Anakin suffering from those nightmares alongside Padme. Then his Force ghost approached, reached out his hand, and whispered silent words. The pain ceased, and Anakin's expression finally returned to a more peaceful rest. Revan could calm Anakin's mind at that moment, but as long as the Sith Lord was at large, Anakin would not be free from suffering. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan began to discreetly follow his former apprentice's footsteps through the corridors of the Senate. He saw him constantly entering and leaving the Chancellor's private quarters, sometimes at inappropriate times. One day, Kenobi hid behind ancient columns and listened to parts of a conversation between the two. Palpatine's voice was soft but laden with hidden intentions. He spoke about how the Jedi did not trust Anakin, about how hypocritical and old-fashioned the Council was. Anakin, though reluctant, did not contradict him. Obi-Wan felt a weight in his chest. The seed of doubt was being carefully watered. In the Jedi Temple, the tension was mounting. A closed meeting between the Masters sparked invisible sparks. Mace Windu no longer hid his distrust. Anakin is unbalanced. His feelings are on the verge of breaking. Ki-Adi-Mundi suggested caution, but warned that the Force around Skywalker was unstable. Yoda, serene, simply said, "Difficult the path of the Chosen One is dark, if guided by emotion." Meanwhile, Revan, invisible, walked among them like a specter, observing each sentence with the intensity of one who had already seen that debate, in another era with other faces. In the nights that followed, Anakin continued to be tormented by nightmares. Padme died again and again, and the temple fell in flames at his hands. During one of his most turbulent nights, Revan appeared before him in his last dream. Not in ethereal form, but with sharper contours, eyes covered by his helmet, his voice coming like muffled thunder. "You are not the first chosen one to be consumed by doubt." Anakin recoiled, haunted, but at the same time curious. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Nothing," Revan replied. "I want you to see with your own eyes, before they are blinded by what you think is love." As the tension grew, Yoda and Obi-Wan decided to seek more concrete answers. With the secret help of Bail Organa, they gained access to classified Kamino records that had been deleted from the Republic database. Amidst ancient codes and reports, they found fragments of information about genetic modifications inserted into the clones. Conditioned response protocols. It was like a hidden command, ready to be activated by a specific key. None of these details had been revealed to the Senate or the Jedi Council. The discovery was as serious as it was silent. Obi-Wan felt a chill. It was true. The soldiers were programmed. It was that same night that Revan appeared to Mace Windu, standing on the edge of the temple balcony. His eyes turned to the polluted sky of Coruscant. "The shadow is the throne itself," the specter whispered those same words. "And the throne is closer than they think." Windu tried to extract more, but Revan disappeared. The words, however, remained echoing. The next day, Obi-Wan and Yoda returned to the Kamino archives, now seeking deeper connections. In a set of encrypted transmissions, they found false names connected to the direct supervision of the clone project. One of them referred to an almost mythical figure, Darth Sidious. The link between the clones and the Sith was finally established. Yoda remained silent for several minutes after confirming the data. "Hidden has been the enemy for a long time." Obi-Wan stood up, his expression grave. "The Chancellor is at the center of all this. Can only be him. And Anakin still hasn't brought us any information that would confirm it. If we could find proof." The sentence seemed impossible, but there was no longer any way to ignore the evidence. Revan appeared at the door like a shadow, watching the two. He said nothing, but there was something in the restrained gesture of his head that seemed to confirm it. He had been through this before. Meanwhile, Anakin continued to be slowly consumed by doubt. Padme sensed the distance, but she couldn't penetrate the wall that was forming around her husband. He no longer slept, no longer smiled. He spent more time with Palpatine, who subtly encouraged his resentment. "They are afraid of what you might become. The Force is yours to shape." Revan appeared in the darkest moments, like an echo inside Anakin's mind. He tried to calm Anakin's mind until the Masters reached a conclusion, but the evil powers were too strong. During a routine mission with a small group of clones, Master Plo Koon reported strange behavior from the commander accompanying him. A lack of hesitation, an unusual coldness even towards civilians. When questioned, the clone simply replied, "The mission is everything, sir." The report was immediately sent to the council. Yoda, Windu, and Obi-Wan analyzed it carefully and decided not to let their guard down around the clones. Through extensive investigations into Kamino's camouflaged records, the Jedi Council confirmed what had previously been only suspicions. Darth Sidious, under forged identities and encrypted code names, had been overseeing parts of the clone project since its inception. His traces were scattered in microtransactions and remote approvals, always hidden behind obscure signatures. But something was still missing, the centerpiece. It was then that Obi-Wan, with the support of Plo Koon, set out on another mission to investigate hidden coordinates found in the Kamino archives. If they were lucky, this would be their last. The coordinates led to a planet erased from the maps. Morvax, a gray world with no living atmosphere, orbiting a dying star. Upon landing on Morvax, the Jedi found ruins buried under ash. Beneath the hardened ground was an ancient Sith structure, powered by residual energy and guarded by ancient, still lethal combat droids. Moving cautiously through the corridors, they faced fierce resistance from Sentinels programmed to eliminate any intruders. When the group seemed cornered, Revan's Force Ghost appeared amid the gunfire, manipulating the environment with his presence and guiding the Jedi to the core of the crypt. There, hidden beneath the containment field, lay a red and black holocron. When activated, it revealed Sidious' true plan in a hissing projection: to exterminate the Jedi Order with a hidden command, the so-called Order 66, and thus assume the role of Emperor under the name of a new galactic empire, going from Chancellor to Emperor of the galaxy himself. Stunned, Obi-Wan and Plo Koon recorded everything. The message was clear. The tone was one of cruel apathy. Sidious had been planning this coup since before the army was created. The holocron detailed the remote activation protocols, the genetic programming of the clones, and simulations of civil domination under the pretext of order and security. The revelation was a devastating blow. Revan watched them in silence, his face hidden by his mask, but his energy indicated grief. "Now you see the cycle," he murmured before disappearing into the shadows of the temple. The Jedi knew they couldn't keep this secret. It was time to act, even if it was dangerous. Now there was no doubt, and they had proof. Palpatine had to be eliminated as soon as possible. Back on Coruscant, the Jedi Council held an emergency meeting. With the evidence in hand, they decided on a drastic measure: leak some of the information to trusted senators and launch a clandestine operation to deactivate the clones before Sidious could issue any orders. Bail Organa and a few other allies received the data and began to form a political bloc against the Chancellor. Simultaneously, the other masters were sent to the main clone bases to neutralize the hidden protocols. The galaxy teetered between fear and mistrust. The Jedi knew they were racing against time. Amidst all this, Anakin Skywalker continued to suffer an emotional breakdown. His dreams about Padme worsened, now showing her death at the hands of the Jedi themselves. His visits to the Chancellor became more frequent, his ties to Obi-Wan more fragile. One night, as he walked through the columns of the Jedi Temple, he saw Revan appear before him once again. The Spectre's voice was more intense, more human. "Do you want to save Padme? Or yourself? The time for your final choice is over." Anakin was silent. There was no longer any certainty within him, only an abyss where faith once existed. Revan disappeared, leaving only doubt as his companion. The Jedi's actions, however, had an effect. The transmissions containing the holocron's contents were received by several senators, and the evidence began to circulate in the corridors of the Senate. The truth was irrefutable. Clones programmed to kill Jedi. Secret protocols linked directly to the Chancellor's command. Under growing pressure and fearing that Sidious would react violently, the Council accelerated its operation. Troops loyal to the Republic, led by generals sympathetic to the Jedi, began to round up clones as a preventive measure. Order 66 was close to being disarmed before it was even launched, but danger still lurked. The realization that they were acting on shaky ground led Yoda, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan to a grim consensus. There was no way around it. The link between Palpatine and the plan to destroy the Jedi was all but confirmed. But the Chancellor was still a powerful public figure, and arresting him without formal evidence would be a serious political risk. Even so, they made a bold decision. In the dead of night, the three masters marched to the Chancellor's quarters, determined to confront him directly. They did not take a battalion with them, only the truth and their lightsabers. When they arrived, they were not surprised by the silence. Palpatine was waiting for them. The lights in the room were off, except for the sinister glow of Sith artifacts scattered on the table. He greeted them standing, wearing a dark robe. When Windu took the first step forward, Palpatine activated a red lightsaber, revealing his angry face in an expression of contained fury. "You are too late," he muttered. The shadows around them seemed to move. The air grew thick, and then the confrontation began. In the center of the Great Hall, surrounded by the columns of power, the final confrontation erupted into chaos and light. Palpatine, now fully revealed as Darth Sidious, spun with supernatural speed, his red lightsaber cutting trails of fiery energy through the air. Force lightning bolts exploded from his hands, cracking the ceiling and illuminating the shadows as if hell itself had opened up. Mace Windu parried the attacks with ferocity. Obi-Wan fought with precision and caution, while Yoda, smaller in stature, resisted with great effort, using the Force not only to defend himself but to keep his companions alive. Each blow exchanged reverberated off the walls like ancient thunder. Sidious illusions distorted space, turning the floor into chasms and projecting images of marching clones, dead Jedi, and Padme lying on the ground, as if to drive his enemies mad with fear. But the Masters resisted. Windu advanced with contained rage, pushing Palpatine back with relentless blows. Yoda, though exhausted, rose with each fall, channeling all his life energy into a delicate balance between attack and survival. Obi-Wan, wounded in the shoulder, kept his mind clear, always alert to the enemy's movements, looking for an opening, a moment. That was when the doors of the hall burst open with a crash. Anakin Skywalker entered with heavy steps, his eyes tired but his gaze steady. He had been guided there not by a master or an order, but by the Force ghost of Revan, who had appeared shortly before on his path. Revan stared at him silently and led him to the battlefield as a last chance to choose. When he saw Palpatine, Anakin heard the Sith's voice echoing in his mind, trying to drag him back. "They want to take her from you? They're going to kill her." But this time, Anakin closed his eyes. He thought of Padme. He thought of Luke and Leia. And he resisted. Revan, invisible to Palpatine, walked among the combatants like a shadow from the past. He watched the cycle repeat itself before his eyes. The Chosen One tempted by darkness, masters at war with corrupted power. The balance of the galaxy once again on the brink of collapse. He did not interfere, not anymore. He was a silent judge, as ancient as pain itself. He watched Anakin break the chains that bound him, saw the Jedi risk everything for a chance. And in his silence, the Force whispered truths he no longer wanted to hear. Anakin threw himself into battle, joining Windu and Yoda. He fought as if his own destiny were at stake. And it was. Palpatine, sensing the tide turning, unleashed a wave of dark energy and fired a barrage of lightning bolts toward the entrance to the hall. Sidious screamed, striking his final blow against Anakin and Padme at the same time. But Mace Windu, wounded and bleeding, threw himself forward, blocking the blow with his body and trapping Palpatine's lightsaber with a Force lock. It was Anakin's moment. Leaping with the agility of an ancient spirit, the knight spun in the air, moving like a comet, and with one devastating blow brutally severed the Sith Lord's head from his body. Palpatine's head rolled to the floor, and his body fell with a thud, slowly disintegrating into a dark dust that drifted away like smoke. The hall fell silent. The shadow that had dominated the galaxy for so long was finally gone. The empire that had never been born was now eternally aborted. With Palpatine's death, secret signals sent to clone bases that had not yet been picked up by Jedi-led troops were intercepted. The commanders, without the activation command of Order 66, returned to standard protocol. Jedi scattered across the galaxy, many on missions, were notified and returned. The war, which seemed to be the downfall of millennia of Jedi order and culture, was coming to an end. The Senate, armed with evidence of Sidious hidden horrors, canceled all emergency powers and dissolved the Imperial project. Bail Organa and Mon Mothma led the reconstruction, now with a more attentive, more cautious democracy. The darkness had lost, but the price had been high. Anakin Skywalker, though deeply scarred by the last few years, began to break free. The whispers in his mind ceased as soon as he took the life of the being that tormented him incessantly. The nightmares of Padme dying disappeared like fog dissipating in the sun. For the first time in a long time, he slept peacefully. Obi-Wan visited him often after he healed his wounds, and together they rebuilt their bond. Padme, now closer than ever, helped him rediscover the balance he had been seeking. The fear that consumed him turned into compassion, and anger gave way to responsibility. Yoda and Windu remained vigilant, aware that victory over Sidious was not the end of the fight. The echoes of war still reverberated throughout the galaxy, and the Jedi would need to reform their ways. There would be doubts, regrets, rebuilding. But there was also hope, a hope born from the right choice made at the crucial moment. And that, for them, was already a miracle. At the top of an ancient tower in Coruscant, Between the stars and the wind, the Force ghost of Revan watched in silence, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his presence as ancient as the conflict itself. He did not smile or cry. He only murmured, "Is this what I wanted? Peace? What changes will this bring in the future? This was my last appearance in this world. I will not interfere anymore." Then he closed his eyes for the last time, and as he opened his hands, he disappeared into the cosmic wind of the Force, like stardust carried away by eternity. The galaxy did not see him leave, but the Force, ever watchful, would never forget him.